Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review, and today we are featuring this. This is part of Mattel's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe toy line. We have the evil, villainous Skeletor, recommended for ages 4 and up. Alright, so this version of Skeletor is based off of the new Netflix series, as you can see here. So this is completely different than the Masters of the Universe Revelation. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, this is aimed at a much younger audience. If you've seen the new computer-generated cartoon, it's very bright, it's very colorful. The cartoon designs are a lot more, how could I say it? I guess a little bit more kid-friendly. Like the proportions of the characters are a lot more exaggerated. You know, they have like such large frames, small legs, tiny heads, very expressive faces. The action scenes are very dynamic. Everything about the cartoon is very fast-paced. This is really aimed at a much more younger audience, whereas the Masters of the Universe Revelation series, that's really aimed more so towards the older collector, you know, kids or adults who grew up on He-Man like back in the 80s. Whereas this is very full throttle, in your face, kid fun. And that's something I could really appreciate. You know, I enjoy the fresh take on the characters. Like I know that, you know, initially when images of this series of toys was released on social media, it was met with a lot of criticism from the older fans. But for me, I like a nice, refreshing take. I grew up on Masters of the Universe when it first came out in the early 80s. And I've seen some of the different, you know, iterations of He-Man throughout the years. And for me, I think it's always cool when a toy company takes a gamble and they try to re-envision or reimagine, you know, very iconic characters, but aim at a very specific audience. Like these costume designs, they feel a lot more modern, but modern in the sense that they're not like science fiction fantasy like in the 80s. Like when I first watched the first episode, immediately I thought that the character designs kind of reminded me of something I'd probably see like in a video game, like Phantasy Star Online or like Final Fantasy. And I think, you know, it speaks a little bit clearer to like a younger generation than, you know, someone like myself. But, you know, as I stated before, this is intended for a much younger audience. So I have a feeling that, you know, a lot of older collectors and fans might, you know, resist this series, which is okay because, you know, this isn't really necessarily intended for them. But in terms of speaking with the toys, you know, I'm excited, and we're going to take a look at this guy. All right, so this figure I bought about a few days ago. I caught him at my local Walmart, and one of the big surprising things for me is that this guy rang up at only, I think, $9 and maybe like 97 cents or something. And I was ecstatic when I saw that price. For me, any action figure that comes in before tax under $10, for me, that's the sweet spot. The fact that this is a very, you know, robust figure. It's even though it's maybe like, I'm guessing maybe about a 5.5 to 6-inch scale. You know, it looks like it's a lot of plastic, and you know, he has this giant staff. The paint applications, from what I'm looking at right now, look really clean. The package design, I think, is awesome. It's very eye-catching. So everything about this, I'm all on board with, and I think it's going to be a fun ride. So hopefully, you know, this new cartoon series will last more than a season. And, you know, hopefully in the future we'll get more characters than, you know, this very small limited handful that we're getting right now with the first wave. So what we have here, we have Skeletor. The package design looks really nice. As you can see here, this is from the Netflix series. We have an image of Castle Grayskull in the back. The CG generated the new Skeletor computer model here. Very stylized. You know, it's very different than the older traditional Skeletor, but he still retains some of the key aesthetics, like the kind of like putrid green or yellow skull. He kind of has the cowl or hood over his head. His color scheme tries to remain consistent. He's still embodied with like chest armor. So I mean, it's like some of the keynotes are there. They're just kind of like changed for a much modern and younger audience. And I love the logo. The logo looks great. The package design on this kind of reminds me a little bit of the Masters of the Universe 2000X line. There's this, I don't know, there's just something about it. I mean, it doesn't look anything at all like it, but I think just the way the bubbles arranged and the figure placement, I don't know, there's just something about this that, you know, my first impulse was like, wow, this kind of reminds me of that old figure line, which for me is a good thing. Over here, it shows the power attack is nice and bold, so we kind of see the key play features that this figure has. It looks like, I don't really understand this. Maybe it's a swivel thing. We'll see once we open it up. It just looks kind of odd because in this first frame, in his right hand, he's holding the staff. And then the next frame, he's holding the staff in the left hand. So I'm kind of curious, like, if this indicates some sort of arm swinging movement, or if maybe there's like a spring-loaded waist swivel. On the back, some fig photography. A pretty decent image of Skeletor here. And yeah, it kind of goes more in depth about the play feature. So it does look like there's a waist swivel, and it looks like one of the arms actually hammers down. And some of the additional figures in this wave, there's He-Man and I believe Man-at-Arms. It's weird though because they don't actually call them by their names here. They just go by their numerical designation. So this guy reads as HBL66, HBL68. Weird. Unless that was just to avoid spoilers, maybe? I don't know. It'd been cool, I say this every video, if they actually took the time and, you know, maybe had a bio here or something. Like, one thing I do appreciate about the Masters of the Universe Origins line is that they give you that beautiful illustration at the top with the character and, you know, a brief sentence about, you know, what's going on. But here it's a very much a blank slate. If you haven't watched a cartoon, you're not going to be really informed on what's going on. Okay, let's take this guy out. Alright, one thing I was kind of hoping for, alright, so someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's well over 10 years now, but I kind of remember that the Masters of the Universe 2000X line, that the masthead at the top of the box, like how this was placed, that the masthead for the really, really old series was a sticker. And that's what I was kind of hoping for here, but it looks like it's just a cardboard insert. Another cardboard insert, as we saw earlier, with a power attack. Okay, so first impressions of Skeletor as he's still in the tray. Let's make some room first. I'm liking it. It's cool. It doesn't necessarily wow me, but it kind of feels like what it's supposed to feel like. You know, this feels like a toy that's intended for a much younger child. This is not aimed at the serious collector. You know, when I look at something like this, I'm so much reminded of, like, you know, toys that and not that I necessarily grew up on, because I was a child of the 80s, but into the 90s, you know, there was toy companies like Playmates, and they made toys like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know, there were other toy lines like Street Sharks. Stuff that felt very cartoony, exaggerated proportions, very colorful, and this aesthetic feels in line with that. So this is definitely not your father's Masters of the Universe figure. It feels like what it looks like. You know, it feels like a toy. Immediately when I picked it up, all of a sudden I feel all this like spring-loaded features. The plastic feels very soft. It feels and handles like a toy. I mean, and that's a good thing. I mean, you're paying $9 for it. This is not like a $20 premium collectible. This isn't in line with like the Revelation line or the Origins line. But does that mean this is any less, a toy of quality? I don't think so. I think for what it is, right now as I'm handling it, it feels very quality and it feels like what it's supposed to be. A very cool, toy aimed at kids. And right now, man, I'm really enjoying the aesthetic. It's really cool to actually hold something that feels like it's meant to be played with. Like, nothing, not to take away from other toys like a Marvel Legends or even the Masters of the Universe Origins or Revelation line. Like when you handle those figures, they have like so much articulation, so much range of movement. This guy on the other hand's like the complete opposite, but in a good way. Like his articulation's limited, but what he lacks in articulation, he makes up for in terms of playability. Like as I'm holding him here, it's so cool just being able to feel like the spring-loaded feature. Like if I was a little kid, this is something you could easily go to town with because it's like, he has cool waist swivel. He can like punch. He can like hammer down. And the detail's nice. The detail's nice, but again, this is aimed at kids. For example, like his staff here, you flip it over and it's hollowed out on one end. If this was something that belonged like in the Origins line or Revelation, chances are this wouldn't be the case and it'd be fully detailed. But again, this is a kiddie toy, but I think it's a quality kiddie toy at that. The sculpting's nice. I really like this exaggerated proportions of the characters. I really like how they're very top heavy and very muscular. Much like the He-Man figures I grew up on as a child. The 5.5-inch figures, they were so top heavy. They had such giant muscular builds, and they were like larger than life. And with the Origins line, they kind of recreate that look, but at the same time, with the added articulation, their limbs seem a little bit longer and slightly even better proportion than the original figures. Whereas these, it's a complete like 180 on that. It's kind of like they know their audience and they're really going to cater to that. And the result is a really cool looking, animated feeling action figure. I think this would make a great display piece. I'm not disappointed in it. For $9, this is great. And upon further inspection, let's take a look at this guy up close. So his skull face, the detail's there. It's hard to see under this camera and with the lighting. Let's see if we could get in focus. Yeah, it's hard to see his face, but if you had this figure in hand, you'd be able to discern the detail. Like there's the sculpting where the teeth are, the ridge of the nose, the eyes. It's all cut really well, but it's just kind of hard to make out. I think what would help is if they added a wash to this, just to get some ink or paint into the recesses to really bring out the details. But without the details, he looks a little bit more ominous. You just kind of see the eyes. I love the cowl over his head. And it's really cool how the cowl goes over his head, drapes over his shoulders, and then he has this, like, it almost looks like the skull of like a goat or ram, placed on his chest, and then the horns wrap around his shoulders, under his arms, and this back. It looks really cool. I would love to see this design, but done in a much more realistic interpretation, like on an Origins or Revelation figure. Because I do think the costume elements of this would look great on like one of those lines. The idea of it is so cool. Like the idea of a skull with the horns wrapped around the body looks awesome. And then over here we have a skeleton hand, and it's wrapped in chains, but the chains are just the same color as the bones. And I do enjoy that. I like the asymmetry of the figure, like how if you split him in half, the left half doesn't match the right. The belt is really cool too. The belt kind of has these fangs engraved here. So this whole like armor piece kind of almost works together to create a face. So you have like the eyes, you have the horns, you have the nose, and then you have the mouth. It's really wild. I like that a lot. He has this giant gauntlet on one forearm. Nice thick boots. And just like the original Skeletor, he's, barefooted. So he kind of, instead of having webbed feet, this guy kind of looks like he has three-toed claws. Or talons, if you will. Alright, so in terms of articulation, this guy's kind of hard to get into. I apologize that this guy's kind of hard to get into focus for some reason. Alright, so in terms of articulation, his head does not want to rotate or move, which is understandable. It's covered by this cowl. His arms do rotate around, but it's hindered by the overlap here and here, so it only goes so far. He does have wrist articulation, so if he wanted to, he could hold his staff with both, or kind of like emulate that he's holding it with both hands. Alright, so in terms of an ab crunch, it's not so much a crunch as it is more like a spring-loaded like arching feature. So his back will arch, and then once you release, it springs forward. He does crunch forward, and then when you release, he kind of goes back to a neutral position. He does not have a waist swivel, but there is a swivel at the top of his abdomen, so he could throw punches going left or right. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with the spring-loaded feature for his arching back, if you wanted to, you could arch back and just hammer down. Leg articulation, it's very standard. Ankles could rotate. There is no knee articulation, but his legs could kick forward and it could kick out. So that's pretty much Skeletor in a nutshell. Alright, so if I had to rate this figure numerically, based on what it is and taking into consideration the audience it's intended for, I'd probably easily give this a 6.5 to a 7. But that's a high 7. It's, this, for what it is, I think it's a great figure. The price point is wonderful. It's under $10 before tax. You get a nice staff accessory here, which is really awesome. I love how it's a much more exaggerated version of Skeletor's staff. The figure itself is really nice. But like I said, this is aimed more so towards kids. If you're an adult collector, an adult fan of Masters of the Universe, I think this is a great launch pad to introduce your children to Masters of the Universe. These are toys that I think they'll very much enjoy playing with. There's a great cartoon that complements this, and it's something for them to sink their teeth into and absorb and become familiar with the much more modern fiction of the characters. So yeah, I think Mattel's on the right foot with this. I'd like to see more figures, more characters, hopefully a vehicle or two or a play set. But I think this is a great start. You can't go wrong, with a He-Man and a Skeletor. And I think, this is a very cool iteration of Skeletor. This is Skeletor for a modern, younger audience, and I think it's wonderful all the way around. And if anything, I would just love to see this design applied to the much more, mature figures like the Origins line or the Revelation line. Yeah, so this is, for me, I enjoy this. This is a very welcome addition to my Masters of the Universe collection. I hope it could be, for yours also. So wrapping this video up, once again, my name is Lou. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber or viewer, thank you so much for your likes, comments, and support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, go out there, do some shopping, or go online and do some shopping. If you see these toys in stores, give them a serious look-see. I think it's worth the risk, for under $10 to at least check out one of the figures for yourself. You know, if you don't like it, you know, this resell it, or, you know, hand it off to a kid or a niece or nephew that you know would think they'd enjoy it. But I think, you know, for most people, they might be pleasantly surprised. You know, if you keep your expectations not necessarily low, but not too high, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You know, it's a fun toy, you know, emphasis on toy. And it's a fun toy that's based within the Masters of the Universe. And, you know, it's a new take on the characters. And I don't know, I just like these a lot. So, I'll see you at the next video. Take care.